In Chapter 2, we're going to work on enhancing photos. You'll see how to take an old, lifeless photo, increase the vibrancy, and give it a lot of snap. This is a photo from an old album that was cut out of the original, and it was laid on the scanner. You can even see part of the scanning bed here. With a bit of retouching, we can take an old scanned photo like this and improve it. Here's an example of an old photo that's been laying around and suffered from years of abuse. There's all kinds of spots, scratches, spots on it. We'll see how to clean those up, and you'll also see how we can pull out a part of that photo, enhance it, retouch it, and do all kinds of variations. Here's a photograph that has a very distracting background. You'll see how to use the new artificial intelligent routines to improve on the background and enhance the photo. Here's a photo that's almost impossible to see. With a little bit of effort, we can bring these people back to life and we can see what's going on. We can see that this is an old photograph where the characters are involved in doing a little fencing. All this and more in Chapter 2. I've downloaded the sample image book. It's available for free on my website, lenatlenshamn. There's information below the video on how to get this book. I'm going to turn the page here, and I'm going to select this old windmill image. Remember that when you select, the image is highlighted. I'm going to right-click, say copy the image, and then I'm going to use the Alt-Tab trick to return to Paint Shop Pro. In Paint Shop Pro, I'm going to say Edit, Paste as New Image. I've gone ahead and followed the instructions in a later chapter that shows how to customize the user interface. So I've got a customized toolbar here now, and one of the tools is Paste as New Image. And here's the old photograph of the windmills. I can't stand it because it's going downhill. Let me just do a quick review of straightening by dragging the horizontal line, accepting that. That's a little better. I'm going to do a quick one-step photo fix. So under Enhance Photo, one-step photo fix, and that's all there is to it. So you can take some old lifeless photos, and in one step you can improve them quite a bit. Now let's go on to a bigger challenge. I'm going to go back to the sample book. In the sample book, I'm going to select this old class photo, right-click, copy, Alt-Tab back to Paint Shop, and use my Paste as New Image tool, and there it is. This old photo needs a lot of work. Let's see what the one-step photo fix will do for this. Not a lot. Let me undo that. And let's go with the Smart Photo Fix. Now the screen is divided into two parts, the original and the results of applying the Smart Photo Fix. We can adjust things like the overall brightness, up and down. We can adjust the shadows, and there's no rule of thumb here. You just have to play with these things until you find something you like. Highlights, darker, brighter, more colorful, less colorful. Original, we can change the focus a little fuzzier or a little sharper, and we can adjust the amount of blacker, or we can adjust the amount of white. You just have to play with these different options to see how you can improve it. Once you're satisfied with the changes, go ahead and say OK. I think I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of cropping here. Just going to clear this off and capture just the class in a new cropping area so I can focus on that. I don't need all this raggedy stuff that was scanned. Next, I'm going to explore the brightness and contrast tool. So I'll go to Adjust, Brightness and Contrast, And one of the options is this histogram adjustment. Let's take a look and see what that does. We get this new dialog box, and we have all kinds of things to adjust here. We can run these sliders up and down and see what the effect is. And we can drag the gamma back and forth. Again, there's no rule of thumb on this. We just have to work back and forth until we find something that we're pleased with. You can drag this low slider back and forth, or the high end, or you can adjust the middle. And when you get something you like, you say OK. There's another related tool here, adjust just plain brightness and contrast. And here we can adjust the brightness from a little to a lot, and we can adjust the contrast. Let me cancel that. You notice that the original photo was in black and white, and it's aged and got sepia toned. Let's return this to a black and white photo by going to Image, Grayscale. And now, when we do the brightness and contrast, we can play with the results here a little bit. You can either drag these sliders, or you can actually enter values here to fine-tune it. If you don't like that, you see what's going on. For the contrast, same thing. You can adjust the sliders. There are also these little arrows that will jump you up and down one at a time. And when you're happy again, you say, OK. Now the problem you see with this photo is that when you get the class on the right side pretty much where you want it, the class on the left side is a little bit too bright. The way to fix that is to select out these children, and I'm going to use the freehand selection tool, and I'm going to try to lasso just the ones that I want to mess with, and you'll have no end of fun doing this. Now whatever I do is only going to affect the selected area. So now if I go back to brightness and contrast, and I adjust things, I'm going to slide this around so you can dramatically see that I'm just working on that selected area now. So I can increase the contrast, or I can decrease the brightness until I get that group of children to match the others. Let's see if there's any hope for this old scan picture of the fencers. So I'll select it, copy the image, Alt-Tab back to Paint Shop, and use the Paste as New Image tool. And now let's see what we can do with brightness and contrast on this. So we'll say Adjust Brightness and Contrast. Obviously we need to improve the brightness a little bit and the contrast a little bit, and we can work back and forth on these until we get something we really think is about right. Just as a matter of fooling around with the brightness level and the contrast level until you get the detail you want. See, we can go from very little detail to too much, and we need to just fine-tune that. When you're satisfied again, You can say OK. This may be another case where we want to crop and change it to a grayscale. So I'll do a quick crop. And let's go to Image, Grayscale. And you can continue to play with this. For example, wonder what you can experiment with a one-step photo fix. That helps quite a bit. Or you can do the smart photo fix. And again, this is just a matter of trial and error, just experimenting till you get things the way you think they should be. And there's no end of adjusting to try to improve this picture. There are a lot of scratches and spots and things on this old scanned photo. We'll see how to deal with that kind of thing in another example a little later. Here's a photo of some fall trees. It was taken when the lighting was not ideal. And very quickly we can take this average snapshot and improve it a lot. Let's select it, right click, copy the image, jump back to Paint Shop using the Alt-Tab trick, and in Paint Shop do this quick paste as new image. The system remembers that the cropping tool was used last, so we're going to just get off of that. Here's a quick trick to add some snap to a fall foliage photo like this. I'm going to say adjust hue and saturation, vibrancy. Let's just slide this vibrancy tool aside and let's adjust the strength of the vibrancy. See what's happening? We can go the other direction and create more of a moody scene, but for fall foliage we like to have it snap. Notice that there's a settings window here. If I click on that, we can select the last used setting, the default setting, more vibrancy, or we can actually click here and save our own custom vibrancy if we're going to use this a lot. I could say something like my fall trees. Okay. The next time I want to adjust the vibrancy, I may have a whole collection of photos that were taken with the same lighting, for example. I'll go back to adjust hue and saturation, vibrancy, and now I can click here and select the one that I saved, and there we go. Vibrancy can add a lot of snap, in this case to some fall foliage, but it can add a lot of snap to your other photos as well. Here's a sample image that's actually an old photograph that was scanned from a newspaper. And newsprint is never ideal. So let's copy this photo into Paint Shop Pro and see what we can do with it. And after copying, I'll just paste as a new image. And now if I zoom in here at this scanned photo, you'll see some of the problems with newsprint. There's a lot of noise in this photo, and there's a way to remove that fairly easily. I'm going to go to Adjust One-Step Noise Removal, and now if I zoom in, you see a lot of that nasty noise has been replaced. If I undo that, and I go to Adjust Digital Noise Removal. Then we get a dialog box that gives us a before and after version, and we have the ability to go in and change the noise correction functions, and you can play with this until you find some variation that you like. And when you're all done, you can just say OK. There's some other problems with this old photograph. The background here is very busy, and we'd like to get rid of that background. Well, we could go in and just select the paint tool, and we could choose a color for our paintbrush and a size, and we could go in and just try to paint out all that background. That would be possible, but there is a better way. In PaintShop Pro 2022, there are some new tools called Artificial Intelligence, and we're going to go in and select the AI Background Replacement tool. And when we do that, the system's going to calculate, and try to identify the background that we want to replace. It does the best it can. However, as you can see, it selected a little too much. So we have a tool here where we can either add or remove selected background. We can also adjust the brush size, and now we can go in here and we can unselect the parts of the background that we don't want to remove. And we can refine the selection. And you can paint around this. Well, we have a large area here that we'd like to unselect, so let's make the brush size bigger. And then we can go in here. Well, we don't want to lose his hand, do we? And with a few strokes and a little patience, you can deselect some of this. If I right click, I change from deselecting to selecting. I can alternate back and forth by right clicking to fine tune the selected areas. There's a lot of work that I could do in this area. Let me zoom in on that area. I'm going to choose a new zoom factor, maybe 300. And now I'm going to use the pan tool. This is a little different than the pan tool in other applications. I click on that pan tool and I slide the little pan box around, and when it's where I want it, I can go in. Now I need to reduce the size of the brush quite a bit, and now I can go in and fine tune this and paint closely around and get more and more detail. Well, you get the idea. This requires a lot of patience if you're going to do it very nicely. A lot of work, a lot of adding, and if you add too much, you have to deselect it, deselect, and select. Let me zoom back to the full display, and once you've refined this selection area to remove the background, you go to the next step. So I go to next, and in the next step it says step 2, click a thumbnail to choose a perfect background or choose another option. Okay, let's see what we've got. Here are a bunch of backgrounds that we can choose from. They've given us all kinds of backgrounds in the program. A brick wall there, we've got a stone wall. There's all kinds of things we might choose. Or, if we don't like any of those, we can go browsing and we can select our own image for the background. We can go back to the original, or we can choose transparent background. Once we're satisfied with the background that we're going to use, we'll just select Done. And it's not obvious what happened, but over here it's added a new layer. And so if I click on this layer that has the transparent background, I can then go and replace that background with some other color or whatever. I can use the flood fill tool. If I want to choose a white background, I'll right click. Let me undo that. Or if I left click, I'll use the foreground background. Or I can actually go in and pick from all the options. I can pick just a color that I like, or I can pick a gradient fill that I like, and I can choose whether that gradient is linear, rectangular, or a sunburst pattern. I could choose actually a pattern from the stock collection of patterns. This would be strange, but if I say I want this pattern, and I say OK, now when I replace the background with that pattern, something different happens. There are endless variations of how you can choose to fill the background that you've created with the Artificial Intelligence Background Removal tool. There's another new tool in PaintShop Pro 2022 that's very similar to the Artificial Intelligence Background Removal tool. It is the AI Portrait Mode tool. Let's clear off Oliver here. And let's go fetch a new image. And here's a candid picture of Lucille, and we're going to turn this into a portrait. So let me select this picture, copy it, Alt-Tab back to PaintShop, and then paste it as a new image. And here you see again we have a busy background. This time let's select Adjust Artificial Intelligence AI Portrait Mode. The system's going to think about this for a bit, and it's going to again suggest the part that we want to change in the background. This is very similar to the background removal tool, and we can go in and fine-tune the selection that we want. And we can zoom in and out and do a lot of close-in work. You know how to do that now, so I'll leave all that close detail for you to do. Let's go to the next step now. This is slightly different than the background removal tool. Instead of having the background replacement options, we have this blur tool. And if I slide that around, you can see what difference it makes. There's the original, and I can throw those things farther and farther into the background by blurring them. This is very handy. Sometimes you have a picture of somebody taken on vacation, and you don't want to lose the context of where the picture was taken, but you want to de-emphasize what's in the background. In this case, I'm going to de-emphasize it quite a lot, and there's an aperture shape, and there's area of focus where we can feather the edge, we can change the focus range. You experiment with that, and when you're happy, you say you're done. And there's the new portrait with the background kind of fuzzed out so it's not so intrusive. So with a little work and some patience, you can take that snapshot and turn it into a professional looking portrait. It's not unusual to have old photographs that have a lot of blemishes and scratches. Let's use this old photo and see if we can clean it up with some of our tools. Well, before we can do anything, we probably should rotate this to be right side up instead of sideways. So there's a tool here where we can rotate left or we can rotate right. If I select that, it rotates it right side up. There's a lot of work that can be done on this photo. Let's focus in on Aunt Selma for now. I'm going to select the cropping tool, and then I'll drag out a crop, and I'll select the 5x7 option, and I'll select the rule of thirds. Well, no matter. For this portrait, I'll just drag it out and adjust and adjust until I get Aunt Selma in here as a portrait. Okay, I'm going to crop that as a new image and select that new image and then zoom in a bit, and you can see that there are scratches and blemishes on this photo. I'm going to go here and select the scratch removal tool, and then I'm going to click and drag, and you'll see what happens. Click, drag. If you can see those three bands, what's going to happen is the system is going to take the contents of those outside parallel bands and mush them into the center area. When I release, you'll see it go. Up here we have a width option, so we can change the width of that scratch removal tool, and we can click and drag and remove it. We can even use the scratch removal tool to remove chunks or blemishes. If I want to get in here, I probably need a thinner removal tool, so let me change the width to about 12, and let me zoom in, click and drag. There's something to hear on the face. Click and drag, click and drag. Another option we have for clearing up some of this dirt is the clone tool. So we select clone. Now the clone tool works by selecting an area and then copying that area into a new place. I'm going to reduce the size of this tool first. I'm going to hold the Alt key down and push the mouse. I could also use the size tool up here to do the same thing. So the way this works is I'm going to right click and drag. It captures the area and then fills in the selected area. Let me select a new capture area and click. You can see how that works. Now, if I zoom in, I can change the size of my clone tool, and I can get in here and very finely remove all of these spots. So there are times when the clone tool works a little better than the scratch tool, but you can use these alternately back and forth. Now, it takes a lot of patience to go in here and clean up some of these blemishes on Aunt Selma's face. Zoom in, experiment a little bit. If you don't like it, you can always undo. Another related tool is the makeover tool. Let's see how that works. There's also a red-eye tool that you can use, but we're going to select the makeover tool for now. Now this is similar to the scratch removal tool, except that instead of having a line with outside areas that it fills in, it has a circle with outside areas that it fills in. Click, click. Now in this case, I'm going to zoom in a lot and Alt, hold the Alt key down and change the size of this. And it takes a lot of work, but you can gradually go in here and fine tune. Now, let's do this one. So with a little patience, you can zoom in and out and alternate between the makeover tool and the clone tool, the scratch remover, until you clean up the portrait. A quicker way to fix all these blemishes in the background might be to use the old artificial intelligence tool. Let's try that. Adjust artificial intelligence, background replacement, and the computer's calculating. And it's done its first guess. A little better guess this time than it did with Lucille. So let's go ahead and say next. And again, we can select transparent. We can select from different backgrounds, custom, original. Let's just see what happens. We can always undo this. What happened was it created 3 different layers: the original background, the raster background, and the raster with Aunt Selma there. Once again, if we pick this, we can fill in that transparent area with a color. So let me go in here and select, instead of using the material properties, let me just use the pick tool and pick one of these areas in the background and say OK. Now when I do a flood fill, it flood fills the background with that basic color that was in the original photograph. Of course, there are a lot more things you can do with the Aunt Selma picture. If I zoom in here, you notice that the background removal tool left a jagged edge. What I can do is I can go over here and I can choose the soften brush. And again, right click and drag, change the size of that soften brush. Watch what happens when I paint over that. I reduce the jagginess of those edges. This can also work even in Aunt Selma's face, where I can soften this up. The other thing I can do is I can go back to our old adjust one-step noise removal, and that will improve things quite a bit. And it goes on and on. It might take a lot of work on an old damaged photo, but with a little effort you can come up with many variations of portraits from the Aunt Selma picture. Remember where we started? We started with this very damaged old photo, and we ended up with all kinds of possibilities for creating a portrait of Aunt Selma. Let's return to the old family photo, and this time let's make a portrait of Grandpa Nasman. Now if we use the cropping tool, we're probably going to get a lot of things here that we don't really need. So instead of the cropping tool, let's use not the clone tool, but the object removal tool. This allows us to use this little lasso to trace around the area we want. I'll zoom in here just a little bit, and I'm going to start lassoing Grandpa Nasman. I want his coat here. Well, I'm going to be stuck with Great-Grandpa's hand, it looks like. We'll fix that later. When I get close to the end, I release, and now I have the object removal tool as a selection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that selection with Control C, and then I'm going to paste that selection as a new image. And so far so good. Let me go ahead and use the AI background replacement tool. Let's see what the system thinks about this. Okay, now I'll just fine tune. It did a pretty good job, didn't it? You just just use the tool to fine tune this a little bit. I'll still have some fingers in there. We'll fix that. Let me go ahead and say next. And let's do the transparent thing again. And say we're done. I'm going to select the raster area and use the flood fill tool to fill that with, this time I'm going to fill it with white. Okay, now I've got a lot of jaggies on the edge of this, so let me use the soften brush and go around and smooth that out, soften those jaggy edges a little. And I'm going to try the one-step noise removal. That helps quite a bit. I can go in here and soften this area a little bit. Soften this a little bit. And before long, I'll have this, well, what am I going to do with this hand? Well, that's easy. I'll just use the clone tool and make it a little bigger here, capture an area and paint over those fingers with some of Grandpa's coat here. Let's expand this a little more. Well, you can see how we're playing the game. Now I can use the paintbrush tool, and I want to use the white color to paint in a couple of these little things. Well, that's getting better, but what I would like to do is I would prefer to have Grandpa Nasman centered in this portrait, not off to the right like this. Well, here's a trick. I'm going to go to the Add Border tool, and I'm going to make the color be white. Okay, and then I'm going to make the size of it, oh, I'm going to exaggerate here. Let me make this about 600 and see what happens. Okay, now I've got Grandpa there. And I can use the crop tool to put him in the center of the picture. And I can continue to refine this portrait as I like. And with a little effort, I can go from this old, originally messed up picture, and I can go in and create a nice portrait of Grandpa Nasman. Well, now that you've seen some of the techniques that can be used to improve and retouch photographs, here is a challenge for you. Copy some of the images from the sample project book and see if you can duplicate this. Go from this old faded photo where they're leaning over and change it into a better looking black and white snapshot, or maybe take the image of this young fellow and straighten him up, maybe soften the background a little bit, and get an improved snapshot of young Len.